All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. First off, thank you everybody for being here. My name is Michael Coker. I am the president of the organization Citizens for Mulberry, but we just appreciate your time. I noticed we've got a lot of people standing. We got some empty seats over on this side. Got a few fill in if anybody's looking for a seat. But before we get started today, I want to talk to you a little bit about who we are. First off, let me go back. Who am I? So my name is Michael Coker. I've lived my whole life in Gwinnett County, okay? I've lived here my whole life. I actually moved in the proposed city of Mulberry when I was 8 years old. So I've been in this community for 30 years. I remember I was talking to some of the other people in the audience today. I remember when my family used to have to drive to Buford to go to the nearest grocery store. So we'd go all the way there. So I've been here for a while, and so I grew up here. My parents still live in the same house that they lived in that I grew up in. And like every teenager, I thought I was going to get far away from my parents. And then my wife and my children, we end up moving to a house that's 2 miles away from my parents, right here in the city limits of Mulberry. So thank you for being here on behalf of myself, on behalf of the rest of the organization. But we got a special treat today. So today we have the legislators that were behind this bill, Majority Leader Chuck Efstration and then Senate Chairperson Clint Dixon. They are both here to answer your questions, to answer my questions, as I know we all got questions of what does this city mean? How is it going to operate? How are things going to work? And so they're here. We're going to take those questions from you. You've seen, you could either text those questions to me or feel free to write them on a note card. We're going to read them out and we're going to answer those questions here for you today. But we're lucky to have them here. So before I invite them up here, I just kind of want to go over what the agenda is for this evening. So the first thing we're going to do is Majority Leader Efstration is going to give a little opening statement, a little statement about the city, the charter, why he chose to sponsor this legislation. Then you're going to hear from Senate Chairperson Clint Dixon, and he's going to talk a little bit about the legislation, and then we're going to move into the question and answer session. So before I call Majority Leader Efstration up here, I want to tell you a little bit about him. Leader Efstration represents House District 104, which includes Auburn and Hamilton Mill. He started his career as a prosecutor for Gwinnett County. He was first elected to office in 2013. He quickly rose through the ranks to become the administrative floor leader for the governor of Georgia. And in 2022, his Republican colleagues at the Georgia House of Representatives elected him the majority leader. Leader Efstration lives here in the proposed city districts with his wife Ashley and their 2 sons. So if you would, go ahead and join me in welcoming Majority Leader Chuck Efstration.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Wow, what an incredible crowd here tonight. This is incredible just to get to see so many friends, neighbors, folks who I've known for so long and talk about what matters a lot to me. And that is this proposal to create a new city in our community to represent us, reflect our views and wishes is an incredible, exciting opportunity for us to make clear that local control of planning and zoning is something I've heard about for years, that we've talked about for a long time, and to have a proposal finally on the ballot before us that would allow a new city government without any city property taxes to come into place so that your neighbors, folks within our community, can represent us for planning and zoning purposes is just amazing. You know, when I was first elected, there were farms all across House District 104. When I first came into office, this was a quasi-rural district. And just in the time I have been elected, we have seen that change where now agriculture isn't the part of our community that it was before. It's we look at vacant land and say, I wonder when that's going to be another development. Wonder when that's going to be another subdivision. And what type of high-density growth are we going to be faced with based upon decisions that are made outside of our community? Now let's talk about this specific proposal and get into some details here. As I mentioned, this is local control of planning and zoning, and there is no more important issue as I talk to constituents than growth. And the proponents of Mulberry are not anti-growth, we just want responsible growth. So what's on the ballot May 21st? On May 21st, you're gonna decide the future of our community. You're gonna decide whether 10 years from now, you made the right decision. And what I'm telling you is, with the out-of-control proposals for high-density growth, we are not going to recognize our community in 10 years if this doesn't pass. Apartments, 1,000+ home neighborhoods that are being proposed and voted on by folks who don't live in this area is not reflective of our concerns. Our concerns that I've heard are that we don't have the infrastructure to support these new proposals. Traffic is already at a standstill in so many areas. Our schools are at capacity. Why would we approve additional high-density development when we don't have the infrastructure to support it? It makes no sense. And it's because of this that I expect this ballot measure is going to pass. And it's vitally important to me and my family that it does. It's vitally important to so many of you I know, because if we don't, we are not going to recognize our community in 10 years. It will be fundamentally transformed to be high density in a way that we can't even imagine. Now, just to briefly talk about how this proposal came about, I, like Michael, grew up in this area. So I grew up in this area. My first job was at the Publix on Hamilton Mill Road at Brazelton Highway, bagging groceries. I went to the University of Georgia in law school, came home. I worked in the DA's office as a felony prosecutor. I love this area, and I want to live in this area for the rest of my life. I now live on the other side of Little Mulberry Park. I've got young children. My wife, Ashley, is here with me tonight. We love this area. We love Mulberry Park. We care about this community. And what happened was I was contacted. Folks said, hey, Chuck, are you aware of this development that's occurred this place? You know, I've heard that there's a new rezoning that's being talked about on Brazelton Highway. What are your thoughts? And then in 2023, there was a proposal to build 700 apartments at the intersection of Sardis Church Road and Hamilton Mill Road. And I saw this community come together like never before to say, no, stop, enough. And our voices are not being heard at the commission level right now. We do not feel that it's appreciated just what a bad fit this would be for our area. There's already terrible traffic at Hamilton Mill and I-85. Why on earth would we have 700 apartments, 3,000 new residents, another 1,000 students dropped into this area without any planning for how to improve the infrastructure to support that kind of growth? I hear about proposals for 1,000+ new homes in our area as we're already sitting in traffic around Mill Creek High School. I hear about all these things, and I went to some of the volunteers. I said, you know what? It would be so easy for me to tell you, call your local commissioner, right? This is a local issue. I represent you at the Gold Dome. I'm sorry, I can't help you. I said, I'm not going to do that. There is an idea. We could create a city and be self-governed. But I'll tell you this, I'm only going to do it under two conditions. First of all, there's got to be a referendum. We've got to vote on it, because this community should come together to make this city what it wants it to be. It should not be imposed from the top down from the state capitol. And I said my second condition is no city taxes, no city property taxes. We already have property taxes from the county. I'm not going to support a bill that would impose city property taxes. So we brought the measure forward at the state capitol. And what we'll do tonight is answer questions about it, because I'm familiar with many of the great questions that have been asked. We had several town halls before the legislative session started in January, had a discussion about this, and there was incredible support for this proposal. As we've had discussions since the bill was considered at the Capitol and is now before you, those conversations have only improved. I love talking about this issue and the future of our community. But ultimately, what does it mean? It means that 5 council members will represent the residents who are in here, will represent each resident of Mulberry, and be their voice on a council about what the future planning and zoning should look like. Now, the legislation that was passed at the state capitol was passed with bipartisan support. I should mention, this is a nonpartisan issue. One of my colleagues from the state capitol, Representative Farouk Mughal, is in the back of the room, who voted in favor of the bill. We had bipartisan support to get this passed, with a desire to get this issue to the voters so that they could vote for it. And the measure will be, as you know, on the ballot on May 21st. It will be at the bottom of your ballot, the last question, I expect, at the very bottom. And you may ask, well, how is it going to be known that it's on my ballot? It's tied to your voter registration number, where your address is. So that's how it'll be there. You can begin early voting April 29th. And you'll just go to the early voting locations that Gwinnett has to vote. Now, I want to run through a few quick points, and then let's talk about some of the questions that have been asked. So first of all, how is this going to be paid for? How is this going to work? If there's no city property taxes, what will the revenue be? Well, we commissioned a feasibility study to look into the details of how revenue would come into the city. And did you know that you are already paying taxes for the funds that Mulberry would receive? And so when you go to register your vehicle, the title ad valorem tax, it's already in existence. There's an insurance premium franchise fee, a financial institution franchise fee. Just when you go get a permit or a license, as you would from Gwinnett County right now, and Mulberry would be taking that over, that revenue would be used locally. It wouldn't be used to support some other part of Gwinnett. And rather than the state sending the title ad valorem funds to the county, it would send it to the city of Mulberry. And that is cost neutral, because Mulberry would be taking service responsibility in some areas from Gwinnett. So rather than Gwinnett handling planning and zoning, and you know what, if you go home tonight and look at your property tax bill, there's actually a line item on there for tax that you pay for planning and zoning. That would be taken over by Mulberry. Mulberry would handle that. Mulberry would also provide inspections and stormwater management. Stormwater, also a line item on your property tax bill already. This city would provide those 3 services with no city property tax imposed, and would still have $1 million surplus for a rainy day in the future. That's local control, that's fiscal responsibility, and allowing you to have a voice in who your leaders are.
You could raise them, the city could decide to raise them, right?
So no, so that's a great question. And look, I love an interactive discussion. As you probably recall, if you went to those meetings at over by the lake several times, we had great discussions back and forth. And so we have note cards tonight, just so I stay organized and folks know who they're know who the questions are coming to. But no, there are protections in the charter which will show you that allow for. Oh, God, I'm sorry. Repeat the question. Gosh. So the question was, are there protections in place to make sure a property tax won't be imposed in the future? Is that it?
Or any of these fees would be increased.
Gotcha. All right, so the question is are there protections to make sure that the property tax wouldn't come about in the future, or that the fees wouldn't be increased? All right, there are protections in the charter that we're going to go through in just a moment that say property tax cannot be imposed for city purposes because the charter, the state law that was passed, says it is prohibited. And further, a great idea that one of the residents had was if there ever is an attempt in the future to do that, it would have to be approved by a majority of the residents. It would have to be on the ballot, a referendum like this being passed. I am telling you that that will not happen. You know why I can say that? Because if we got to that point, there could be legislators, there could be a council who would want to impose that. That could already be done now. Right? Property taxes could be increased already now without this proposal. These folks are going to be elected by you to represent you on this council and to reflect your wishes. The council will be comprised of 5 members, each with districts, and those council members will have about approximately 7,000 to 10,000 resident constituency. So current county commissioners, and we've got one of our great county commissioners here tonight who I've had many good discussions about this with, but he represents in his district 250,000 residents. No county commissioner currently in Gwinnett resides in Mulberry. If you vote yes, you're going to get 5 folks who live in Mulberry, live in our community, and are reflecting your wishes, your desires on this council. And if you ever have a problem with what they're doing, you'll know who to call. What's envisioned here is they'll be practically a neighbor of yours. The objective of making sure that we get this out there and that this is discussed by the community is something that we've embraced from the beginning. There are no high-dollar developers backing this effort. There's no money or special interest that's behind this. The only interest is my love for this community and the collaboration of we policymakers to try to put the best possible proposal before you. Because like I said earlier, it wasn't good enough for me to say, hey, that's a local issue. Call your local elected officials. My job representing you was to come forward with a proposal, give you an option, and allow you to have the local control if you think it's as important as I do. Now the next few steps would really look like this. On the May 21st ballot, if this were to pass, then there would be an opportunity for residents to run for the council, and that would be on the ballot this November. You would elect council members, and the city would be up and running January 1st. Now, a big question I get all the time is, how is this going to change my life? What's this going to do to service delivery that I have? There will be no noticeable change to your life day to day. The city of Mulberry is going to take over planning and zoning, but your public safety, your fire service, the park access, libraries, all the other services that we enjoy from Gwinnett will continue to be there through a service delivery agreement. And by law, that cannot be changed by Gwinnett County in the 2 years after this passes. There will be an opportunity to renegotiate service delivery with all the cities in Gwinnett to make sure that the services best support Gwinnett residents. So if someone tells you that this is going to change public safety, you're not going to have the same fire service, it's going to change, that is not true. That is not true. And let me talk briefly about maybe the most frustrating thing that I have seen so far in this. You know, a man from New Jersey came to my house on Friday night. He came by to tell me why this was such a bad idea and to tell me what was in the charter. Now, it probably wouldn't surprise you. He had no idea who he was walking up to. Poor guy. And more than once, I said, what you're saying is untrue. You know what he led with? Your property taxes are going to go up. A lie. A lie. Okay? You're going to see tonight as we look through the slides, the charter makes clear there will be no imposition of a city property tax. And it makes clear that this should be cost neutral to all involved. In other words, to your question about fees, would fees go up or be changed? The charter makes clear that this is to be cost neutral to residents in the city of Mulberry. Now, could there be Any potential impact to Gwinnett? I've heard that argument made. What is this going to do to Gwinnett's revenue? Well, first of all, if Gwinnett has 40,000 fewer residents to provide 3 services to, I would hope that Gwinnett's taxes would actually decrease. Fewer people to have to provide services to. But unfortunately, the scare tactic now is to say, no, this is going to mean Gwinnett's property taxes are going to go up. Well, that logic doesn't really make sense to me, because this is an offset, as you'll see from the feasibility study, of expenses and revenue, so that it's a trade-off. We are taking on additional responsibility with the revenue to cover it, and we're receiving compensation for it. You know, any other theory to support that argument means that this area is donating to other parts of Gwinnett. That's the only way you can make that argument, logically. Now, the other argument I've heard is, well, high density really makes sense, and Chuck, you just need to embrace it. And what I tell folks is, I am tired of folks who have a political agenda or a desire to, a vision for the future, who don't live in this area, imposing that vision on us. We should have self-determination about what our community, where we live, should look like, and what we believe is smart, responsible growth. I'm not anti-growth. I just recognize we cannot pass high-density development when we don't have the infrastructure to back it up. Now, I know that there are signs out there, these stop signs, right? I've seen these stop signs. You know, the frustrating thing, probably the most frustrating thing is, this organization, Stop, Say No to Mulberry, is registered to a Staples in Wyoming, right? If you truly believe that that's the policy, why are you hiding? You know, of course developers don't like this. The higher the density, the more the return for them personally, for the money. There's no vested interest in our community for the future, for what we're going to have to live with. Heard this argument, well, I have land on a busy road, and I should be able to sell my land for the highest possible return. If I want to sell my land to make apartments, that's my business, not yours. And I'd submit to you that we all have to live in this community. And if you believe that the development is appropriate and fits in this community, then you're going to be able to bring that before the council, elected officials elected by you to represent your views, your beliefs, your concerns, and you shouldn't have any concern if it fits. But if your focus is, I know I can make this with a residential neighborhood, but I can make this with apartments, I don't know what to say to you. We can't support that with the existing infrastructure that we are lacking. Question I often get is, are addresses going to change? Postal code. Well, that's something that happens at the federal level. If that were to happen, that'd be no time soon. There'd be no change in that. Is this going to impact our schools? The answer is no. The school board makes decisions for the schools. They decide which schools are built, where, they decide what the school district lines are. It may tangentially impact the schools in that if we don't have high density development built here, our schools won't be as overcrowded. But no change to the leadership of the school and the direct operation. Now, when this gentleman from New Jersey came by my house the other night, he wanted to tell me that there are specific aspects of the charter that I wasn't aware of. And he started spewing misinformation about what was in the charter. And you know what I said? We got this town hall coming up on Monday night. Why don't I just put the charter up? Why don't we just look at it all together, if that'd be all right? Michael, can you hit it? So first of all, the legislative findings, and pardon my poor highlighting here, but you see, we made findings specifically that a municipal corporation, a city, would be best served with limited municipal government that cannot collect property taxes from its residents and that any other non-property tax revenue, to your question earlier, would be neutral with respect to cost burdens on homeowners. So we wanted to be specific. This is not an opportunity to try to fee you in some strange way. It is we have limited revenue that the county's already receiving, and instead the local government's going to receive it. Michael, will you go to the next slide? Goes on from there in section 1.14. It says, except that the city shall not have the power to assess, levy, or collect ad valorem taxes on real or personal property. Makes it clear that that is not a power authorized to the city, and that the three services offered are planning and zoning, code adoption and enforcement, and stormwater collection and disposal. Those three areas are the only areas that this city would be authorized under this charter to offer services for. Now, again, it says the city council shall not assess, levy, or collect any ad valorem taxes. This is in the property tax section. We cannot be any more explicit about it. And this is an important moment for me to mention. Back when I was doing these town halls last November, December, we had a website up. And I told you at the time, when this charter was introduced, it would be up on the website. When there was a feasibility study, it would be up on the website. When the maps were created, it would be up on the website. It is all up there, and it has been for months. If you want to read this yourself, go to cityofmulberryga.com. Somebody said, that's too long of a URL. I said, I'm having to pay for this, not a developer. So it was cheaper to get the long address, so I apologize. Look at the next one. No amendment to this act by the city council shall be enforceable except upon ratification of such amendment by the registered voters of the city at a referendum. For what I just showed you to change, you all would have to support it. Now you think about, do you have that protection in place today? Is there a requirement that if Gwinnett County wants to raise your property taxes, you have to vote and approve it by a referendum? No. This is more protection than what you have currently. Now, I've been asked a lot about how's this transition going to work, right? If we pass this May 21st, what's this going to look like? Existing state law provides, this is OCGA 3631.8, that the governor can appoint a transition committee. And those would be names that Governor Kemp would consider and decide who would be appropriate. Folks who are supposed to help us get into having this new city stood up January 1st. Next slide. Yep. Okay. This city would also have a 2-year transition period with Gwinnett County. As I mentioned, Gwinnett would be required to continue to provide services unless there was an agreement between the city and county to change that. Further, Gwinnett would be prohibited during the transition period from implementing planning and zoning changes. And so what we would do is we would allow this new city to get stood up, the new elected officials, the council members, to hear from you, to begin working on your behalf, and to work with the county on a service delivery agreement for a longer period of time. I have had the question, what about building permits or other permits, non-planning and zoning? That would continue to be provided by Gwinnett. That wouldn't change. And at the end of this transition period, then the city would be fully autonomous, would be fully running, and would be, I believe, I can even say I know, would be off to an incredible start, an incredible trajectory for our area. And Michael, you can hit the slide. I think that if I just were to sum this up to you, I didn't come up with this idea totally out of my head. I was working with an advocate in the area, talking about the need for some local control in this area. It's a nonpartisan issue. These 700 apartments are proposed. Chuck, what can be done about this? How can we do something? We are not being heard at the county level. And we came up with this idea not just out of our heads, but because we've seen it be successful elsewhere. City of Peachtree Corners was created in 2011. Gwinnett County had the same response at the time. No new cities, you don't need new cities, use caution, exercise caution, be very careful. Peachtree Corners is regarded as one of the most successful cities in our state right now without any property taxes, no property taxes. Implementing services focused on local control of planning and zoning. City of Milton, I've had several people stop me and say, you know what, I used to live in Milton. I lived there when Fulton County handled all local issues, and then I saw when Milton was created, the local control of planning and zoning fundamentally changed our area. That has been incredibly helpful for the future. Property taxes stayed the same, property value went up. There was incredible benefits that came from local control of these important issues. I know that there's going to be an opportunity for questions, and Michael, if it's all right, I'll just have a seat and listen, but I want to thank each and every one of you for your engagement. Through our website, we're putting out information. We want to make sure that you have all your questions answered. It's so easy for someone to run around and say, no, 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 scare you, try to stop you, spew misinformation, be here from New Jersey. You know, I've never thought about going door to door in New Jersey, trying to influence their local politics. So I don't know if I should be concerned or honored that somebody would take the time to do that. No, it's money. You know, it's money. It's either we're going to be told by folks with a lot of money what they think we should do, or you're going to be educated and make the right decision. And that's what I've said from the start on this. You know, you can tell I'm very passionate about it. I think it's a great idea. I think it's going to pass and be an incredible success in the future. But at the end of the day, I and Senator Clint Dixon, we brought forward a proposal here for you to consider, and it's your voice that matters. It's not what I think. This city should be a reflection of what you believe this community can be. And that's ultimately my objective. Thank you again for having me tonight. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chuck. Either one. Whatever. All right. Next up, we have another very important person here today, Senate Chairperson Clint Dixon. Senator Dixon serves as the senator from State Senate District 45, which encompasses northern Gwinnett and Barrow counties. He serves as the chairperson of the Education and Youth Committee, which is a very important committee which reviews legislation related to children ages K through 12. He's also the vice chairman of the Senate Committee on Transportation, MARTA, and he serves as the secretary of the Appropriations Committee. Prior to being elected, Senator Dixon served on the Gwinnett County Planning Commission and built a successful career in real estate. So he's no stranger to zoning issues. Senator Dixon lives with his wife Hayden and their 3 children. So will you please join me in welcoming Senator Clint Dixon?
Good evening, everyone. So grateful to see the outpouring of support and for folks to take time out of their busy day to come and learn more about the proposed city of Mulberry. And I'll just tell you, I was born and raised here in Gwinnett County, graduated from Central Gwinnett High School back in the 90s. And I remember back then, it was a big milestone for Gwinnett County to reach 200,000 residents. And now we're over 1 million residents here in Gwinnett, and some of the proposals from the 2045 Unified Development Plan show that we'll hit somewhere between 1.5 and 1.8 million residents in the next 20 years. And I can tell you, I've seen Gwinnett change quite a bit. And like Michael said, in my career, I am a real estate agent focused mainly on acquisitions for new home communities, not apartments, but new home communities. So I understand land use, understand growth, understand the balance, the need of housing and commercial in a community. But one thing I would like to say to you, kind of what started this movement for Mulberry, for the city of Mulberry for me, in the Senate districts, our districts are a bit bigger than the House districts. My district runs from the city of Beaufort over to where the proposed city of Mulberry would be, on into Barrow County, down towards Winder. But I did start hearing from some residents that were concerned about some of the zonings that were coming up in this area, and also heard from our local county commissioner, Matthew Holcamp, who's graciously here with us tonight, and who Matthew did push back on several of these zonings, and unfortunately, in some instances, was getting outvoted in his own district by commissioners that don't represent this area, nor were they elected by any of y'all, which was very unfortunate for me. To see that happening here, in this proposed city of Mulberry, and there were a particular zoning case, the brand development of the 700 apartments that kind of really lit the movement on fire. I started hearing from Leader Efstration, what could we do to help protect these residents in this area? And since we don't have any local control over, or we don't have any land use control at the state level, that is all handled at the local level, the city of Mulberry movement and the thoughts of that and the talks of that started up. And that's kind of where it started for me. And I do have an extensive background in land use, and served on the Planning Commission here in Gwinnett for 9 years and understand it quite well. And there needs to be a balance of, like I said, there needs to be a balance of residents and apartments. But as Commissioner Holcamp told me when he took a hard stance against new apartments coming to the area, there were 14,000 apartments in District 4, which is bigger than the city of Mulberry, but it is a large amount of apartments in a small area. And dealing with infrastructure issues right there at 85 and Hamilton Mill, he took a stance to be opposed to that, but commissioners that don't represent the area were overriding him. And that's, opportunity for y'all to have more local control here in the city if the city's approved. And there's nothing more American than putting a vote out on a proposal to the residents and let them decide their own future. And so coming from that, as Leader Efstration really dived into the details very well of how the city would be structured, if you back up a couple of years to redistricting, I did bring a proposal forward to expand the Gwinnett County Commission from 5 members, 4 districts, expanding it to 8 with a chairperson, getting those districts down smaller. But that proposal was killed and didn't end up moving forward. But we did create one conservative-leaning district where Matthew was elected. But he still represents, 250,000 people, and that's larger than my Senate district. And as you get to dealing with local issues, more local control, dealing with local government, it's not designed to have such a mass number of folks that they represent. It's supposed to be more local. It's supposed to be closer to the people. And that's what this city would do. You would have 5 city council folks representing only about 7,000 people. And they would be your neighbors. They would be someone in your community or someone right next door that you could go and talk to about land use issues. And then you would ultimately have the control of the future land use plan for the city of Mulberry, only representing about 41,000 folks. And that would give you more local control. It would give you a better vision. Nobody knows dealing with land use and real estate. It's the folks. It's a local issue. It's a neighborhood issue. Each neighborhood within the city of Mulberry has its own characters and its own, kind of heartbeat, I guess would be the best way to put it. And having that more local control and that local vision would help you control the way that the city is developed or not developed. But so grateful to be here with y'all tonight. Looking forward to getting the questions, and we'll turn it over to Michael.
Okay, now we're going to transition a little bit and go to our question and answer session. If you haven't already, there's a number up here. It's a text number, goes right to my phone. I will tell you, I've gotten a lot so far. If you don't feel comfortable texting, there's also an option, some index cards. You can write them down. We have those too. We're going to try to get through as many questions as we can tonight. And we're going to start off with this one. This is one I've seen of a lot lately. It deals particularly with the city hall or or a town center being built. Has there been any discussion about what would happen with that?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. Initially, when cities are formed, and especially when you're dealing with limited services like the city of Mulberry would have, you would not want to take on that expense of creating a town hall, like you see in the city of Lawrenceville, or actually what you're seeing if you go across the line into Barrow County, the city of Auburn. And if you know, City of Auburn, they're having their ribbon cutting at their new town hall, I believe this Friday. But they've been in existence for many, many years, and they've operated out of a small commercial space that's been expanded some. But I would imagine what you would see, and it would be up to the local elected city council folks deciding where that city hall would be, but it would probably be in an existing commercial space that they would be able to lease initially.
What about this one? This is another one I've gotten quite a few, some handwritten as well as some on the phone. How will the city of Mulberry affect currently approved projects? So if there's already projects, let's say neighborhoods or this or that have already been approved by the county, will there be any effect from the city of Mulberry's passage?
Well, any currently approved zonings would be grandfathered into the new city. That's just is land use. It'd be a taking otherwise. But I think that the important consideration is for future zonings that the city would have control over that. It's estimated that only 8% of Gwinnett County is currently undeveloped, and almost all of that is in Mulberry. So really what we're talking about is preserving what is left of Gwinnett that is undeveloped and ensuring that it does not become high density like so many other areas. And so I expect that that's really the consideration I know that's the consideration before you. As you go into the ballot box deciding what to do, you think about 10 years from now, am I going to look back on this moment and say, I wish I had voted yes. I didn't realize what was on the line at the time. So while already zoned determinations, zonings that have already occurred, those are already set, will be grandfathered in. Any unzoned property, any folks who are coming in requesting higher density zoning, that can be addressed with a Mulberry City Council.
Why don't we vote for mayor? No one brought that question up.
So that's a great question. The question is, why don't we vote for mayor? And if it's okay, if you don't mind texting your question so Michael can ask it so we can. I think this is a great question. What you see here is the most limited form of government you can really have. This government can't collect property taxes, is not going to be able to provide services outside of 3 very specific areas, does not have written into the charter to have unnecessary staff. We're talking about very small government, closest to the people to address planning and zoning. And what we've seen in other parts of Georgia, particularly South Georgia, is that the council members will vote for a mayor, and that amongst their membership, they'll select somebody to step forward and be the mayor. So this is a framework that we've seen in other Georgia cities. Certainly the Georgia Municipal Association is familiar with this framework. And I believe that it really makes sense with this small, limited government proposal.
Yeah, Michael, if I could add to that as well, and there's 3 types of mayors in the state of Georgia typically, and you've got what you call a strong mayor, which would be kind of like the city of Atlanta. They would not vote unless there was a tie, but then they would also have veto power like Governor Kemp would have. Then you've got a weak mayor, and that mayor would not have the veto power, but they would again only vote in the event of a tie. The proposal for the city of Mulberry would be a city council. It would be a council-centered mayor, and that mayor would vote. That mayor would have a vote within the 5 members. So they wouldn't only vote. If there was a tie, they could vote in any measure, but they would not have the veto power.
Do you mind if I say something? Can I say something?
If you don't mind, do us a favor. Like I said, we can write down your question, and I'd be more than happy to. I'll be coming around and getting the questions here in just a second. This is another question we've got. If both of our legislators could address the timeline, that's one thing that I've heard. That this was rushed along. We haven't really done the study that's needed. We don't know enough about how this is going to affect. Can y'all address that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. it was moved at a rapid pace, but not unlike many of the other cities that were formed here in Gwinnett County or in the state of Georgia. We did have the town halls. The information was sent out to many residents as we could before the end of the year last year. And there was also a feasibility study that was done, which is another requirement. And as it moved quickly through the legislature, and it did, and signed by the governor in the middle of February, it was moved quickly because of the urgency we got from the residents that were concerned about what was happening with zonings here in the area, and that was Leader Efstration and I's urgency to move as far as in the legislative cycle, moving it quicker than you've seen in the past.
So I would just like to add, this has been the most transparent cityhood creation that I've ever seen, ever, anywhere. Okay, on the website, you have for 5 months had the charter completely open to the public, had the feasibility study completely open to the public. You know, that almost never happens. To have all that information out there before the legislation even gets going, where you can go read it. And you know what has been awesome? As I've been going around the community, I go to the grocery store, I go different places and talk to folks. Folks are reading all of this, have read the charter, have read the feasibility study, understand the issue. And I wish that there was more engagement like that in other cityhood proposals elsewhere. But I think that that's what's unique about this. It's been a completely open, completely transparent process. We had great attendance at the town halls that we had before the session even began. And obviously there's a lot of interest tonight. So congratulations to you all. I think that the timetable has been what it's been, but we've been talking about this for over 6 months at this point, and this open, transparent process is something I'm very proud of.
Thanks, guys. Here's one that's a good one, maybe for Leader Efstration, since he is an attorney. Obviously, some people have some concerns that Gwinnett County's taken a position that parts or all of this law are unconstitutional. Could you speak to that for the people that have addressed that question?
All right, I'm going to go really deep in the legal weeds here, or legalese. So there has been, I think, an argument made by folks who want to oppose this effort that there is some sort of constitutional question as to restricting a city from saying no city property taxes. They'll say, you can't do that. You can't tie the hands of the city. And you know what? If anybody says that to you, you say, show me one Georgia Supreme Court opinion that says that. Just show me one. Show me one bit of what we call case law. Lawyers call case. A case where a court has said that. They can't do it. It has never happened before. And Andrea, it is great to see you. Andrea and I have had vigorous debates going back many years. She and Jim are good friends, but I want to talk about this specifically. Okay? It is untrue that Peachtree Corners was forced to change their charter after they created it. What happened was there was a discussion that took place, and Peachtree Corners voluntarily decided to increase the number of services that they provide. So they have an economic development department, I believe, and have some other things there. But it was not under an obligation to do so based upon the constitutionality. And you know what? This will withstand constitutional challenge. This charter has been drawn to allow local control, local decision making. And if somebody's saying there's going to be an issue with you saying that the city can't impose property taxes, then tell me, how is it that the city of Brazelton, town of Brazelton, doesn't have property taxes? How is it that Peachtree Corners doesn't have property taxes? That we have other cities without property taxes across Georgia? That does not make sense. And I want to be very clear about this. If folks are saying that to you, they're trying to confuse you. They are unwilling to admit that there is no case law to support their point.
Got a couple questions here from a couple local business owners that are a little concerned. Okay, we've talked about no property taxes. As a homeowner, can you address how they might feel any differences with the city of Mulberry if they run a business in the city limits?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So just as you currently would go get your business license at Gwinnett County, just as you would currently go get your, somebody was asking me about a restaurant, an alcohol license. That is with Gwinnett County. The important distinction is this. This proposal is to be cost neutral for anything that the city is taking on. This new council would have the revenue as established from the feasibility study to be able to keep costs as they are. And alcohol licenses would not be automatically part of this new city, okay? The splost that currently is collected, so your 1 extra cent when you're out shopping, that would be unchanged by the creation of this city. It would only be through splost renegotiation in the next few years that Mulberry could actually start receiving some of that penny sales tax. And I said, you may be saying, Chuck, what are you talking about? What I'm getting to is that would be an additional $6 million for the city of Mulberry that Gwinnett is currently receiving otherwise, that Mulberry could use as it sees fit. There is no reason for Mulberry to increase permitting, other expenses on business owners as part of this. Mulberry is going to have plenty of revenue from taxes that are already being paid.
And along those same lines, here's another question about agriculture. I've talked to a couple of people that have family farms, and they say, are they going to feel any effect of this with their family farm that they've had for generations?
Yeah, I would say that they would not have any changes if they're operating a farm. The only changes would be if they decided to sell the farm to somebody that was wanting to develop the property. They would go through the zoning process at the city of Mulberry instead of Gwinnett County would be the big change.
I don't even want to think about this, but this is a common question. I've seen it 3 different times. What if this referendum fails? Is there going to be other opportunities where we could vote on this again? There's been some questions about that, if you could touch on that.
I'm betting everything on May 21st, so I don't even. I'll just tell you, when I'm out meeting with folks, this is incredibly popular. When you're out talking to residents, it's incredibly popular. Folks have good questions that they raise. And sometimes doing something new is scary. It's like, taking this leap to try something new feels like it's a lot to take on. But I'll tell you this, when you've lived here, you know what's going on. You talk about what I've discussed, the change of this community over the years to higher and higher density. You understand the importance. And so I'm focused, I'm all in for May 21st, and I believe that it's going to be successful. I know it's going to be successful on the ballot next month.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, I agree totally with Leader Efstration, being in the community, talking to folks. I do feel an overwhelming show of support for it. I'm all in for the city. Currently, I've always lived in Gwinnett, currently live off of Camp Branch and Wallace Road, just down the street off of Hamilton Mill, but I'm actually building a house in the proposed city, so I would be a resident come probably June or July of this year, depending on how quickly I can get it done. But excited about the movement, all in for it. But as I said in my open remarks, there's nothing more American than, instead of politicians under the Gold Dome setting, policy for you, putting it out or allowing the citizens to vote for that. I said there's nothing more free than that. So we're going to push forward, and we're hopeful and very positively enthused by all the residents and the outpouring of support that it's going to pass on May 21st.
All right, I'm going to ask this question, then I'm going to go collect some additional cards that have been placed. I'm seeing some questions about, hey, my neighborhood is just outside the city limits, but I wish we were a part of it. Will there be an annexation process where I can join the city? If you guys could speak to that.
So at the state capitol, there's a process in place for local legislation like this, right? So the legislators who support the proposal sign the bill and express support for it. And there are 3 legislators who represent the area that would be Mulberry. So it's Senator Dixon in the Senate, and then Representative McCollum and I in the House. And Representative McCollum represents the area up toward the town of Brazelton. I see the mayor of the town is Kurt Ward is here with us this evening. Good to see you, Mr. Mayor. And so those three legislators supported the bill. Now, other legislators have been invited to support it, but I will just say the three of us did all that we could with the areas that we represent. In other words, there's no other parts of unincorporated Gwinnett that the three of us represent that could have been included with all three of us. So if you live just outside the city of Mulberry, and I've seen many friends here tonight who do live outside, and you want to be in, contact your state legislator. Contact the person who represents you at the Gold Dome and express your support to be part of Mulberry so that that could potentially occur in the future.
Great. I'm seeing a lot of questions about the administration of the city, about city employees, how much they're going to be paid, how does that work? If you guys could speak to that for us.
Yeah, so the charter is very clear that the council that's elected will be able to make determinations about hiring staff. There's not even a requirement that a city manager be hired. Now, there's nothing to prevent the council from saying, we need support, we need staff to help assist us with the delivery of services that we're responsible to deliver. But as I said earlier, I did not want this city, I know Senator Dixon and I have talked about this extensively before, I didn't want this city to just create a new level of bureaucracy that may not best serve the residents. This city is limited, it's focused, and it's to provide the best possible service to you based upon the council members that you elect to represent you.
And along those same lines, we've had a couple questions about the 5 city council members. Will there be term limits? Is it a lifetime appointment? How can you guys speak to that for us as well?
Yeah, it would be a four-year term for each one of the council members. They would not be at large. There would be 5 districts throughout the city, so it would be evenly represented. And then the mayor is also elected, but is elected by once they're elected as a city council member, the city council members would elect that mayor through a vote as well.
This is one I'm seeing around. Maybe you guys could speak on this. How will the city be able to raise enough revenue when we may not have as much commercial or industrial spaces as maybe some of the other cities that have incorporated?
Do you have I may have missed it, do you have the slide from the feasibility study?
Yeah, it was on the initial. I don't know if Christian's able to go back to my initial. There's a chart, Christian, on my initial slide set that was going at the beginning.
If we could pull up
there it is, right there.
If we could pull up the feasibility study, now that's really small print. But what I would just say is everything that you see up here, potential operating revenue, these taxes, fees, these are already being collected. There is no new additional tax or fee. The only difference is who's receiving it. So rather than Gwinnett County receiving this portion of the title ad valorem tax and the other fees and taxes that are listed, it would be received by the local government. Now you see what that totals to. $9.45 million. That is the anticipated revenue from those sources that are already being received. And I have to say, the experts who worked on the feasibility study had great partnership with Gwinnett County getting data. I met with the Gwinnett County attorney, the fiscal officer, and they were willing to provide the data that they had, which I was very appreciative to as our experts looked at this. You then see here what the expenses are expected to be. General governmental administration, that's all the overhead around that, general government. The building expense, the inspections, and the planning and zoning. Those are the costs that are just clearly provided, specified there, and that totals $6,610,000. Now, you also see an allowance for capital outlays and reserves. That's additional money that would be saved as part of that for the future, for future planning. And then when you add in stormwater management, which as I mentioned is already a line item on your property tax bill already today, then you would have at the completion there, the total, $7,960,000. Now, what does that mean? That means that there would be a general operating fund surplus of $1,315,000. So for a rainy day to ensure that make sure that costs in the future are addressed, there would actually be a reserve fund with existing taxes that you're already paying. There is no reason, based upon this carefully considered revenue and expenses, there is no reason to believe that your taxes are going to increase. And if someone tells you, just like the man from New Jersey said when he stepped onto my driveway the other night, your taxes are going to go up, I could tell him, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Why are you spreading this misinformation? Because that's exactly what it is. It's someone with an agenda. It's someone who's paid to come here from New Jersey to spew misinformation. This shows you there's actually going to be a surplus with the existing revenue that's already being received by government.
What that surplus could be spent on?
So the surplus is spent. Yes, sure. So the question is, what is that surplus going to be spent on? And the answer is that things come up from time to time. When I was first elected, we were coming out of a recession, right? The government, and local government particularly, often needs to have some reserve funds so that if something unpredictable occurs, I see the mayor nodding his head, if something unpredictable occurs, there's no increase in taxes. You have saved money through careful financial stewardship to use it in that situation.
And
You're collecting, or they're collecting Gwinnett County sewer and water, all right? There is no differentiation, to my understanding, there is no differentiation between sanitary sewer and stormwater runoff. All of that goes to the main plant. And the city would still have to negotiate with Gwinnett County for that cost. So how, are they going to give it to you at a reduced rate so that you have this extra surplus?
Yeah, so as far as sewer and stormwater runoff, they do not go to the same place. Your wastewater, is collected, and sewer line goes to a pump station, ends up, for this part of the county, ends up in the F. Wayne Hill treatment plant where the water's treated. Stormwater runoff, if you're in a subdivision, if you know where you have detention ponds or retention ponds, that water is collected from the street in different pipes and goes there, and then there's a release, a pipe that comes out of that pond, and it releases at the same rate as if that neighborhood had never existed. So engineering, when the neighborhood's developed, they develop where that stormwater runoff goes into that pond and is released off the property at the same rate as it was released before it was ever developed.
Steve, if you would please send a text or just use one of these note cards. I think it's tough for everybody here, and also we don't want to.
while we got the study up here, if one or both of you could address, we've heard some of the opposition's arguments that, well, this study's not reliable. It's not a reliable organization, not a reliable study. Can you guys speak to that for us?
Yeah, this study was prepared by consultants who do these kinds of studies. They were recommended by the person who does these studies at Georgia Tech. While universities offer studies like this, it's incredibly time-consuming and it's also incredibly expensive. What we had here was an opportunity to put forward a proposal that really got to the unique nature of what this city would be, which is very specific services would be provided, and that it would be a very limited form of government. It would not be the kind of expansive municipal government that you may see already in existence somewhere else. This is a new, unique thing where it's completely focused on planning and zoning inspections, stormwater. It is not providing a broad array of services, and imposing city property taxes.
This is a question, somebody obviously who's very concerned about the environment and the number of trees. Can you guys speak to what is the effect will this have on the what seems to be a clear loss or cutting down of trees in our area?
Yeah, what I would say is it goes back to local control. If the city proposal is approved, that would be up to the city council folks that you elect. You know, they would move forward with a comprehensive land use plan for the city, which would lay out areas within the city that they would deem appropriate for potential commercial growth, for residential growth, but then also for areas that would be reserved as agricultural land, things like that. But it would be more, that would be decided at the local level. Also dealing with developments and trees that, like specimen trees that would have to be left during developments, and also trees that would be added back, like you see in new home communities. That would all be decided by your local elected officials.
Here's one of the questions about how the council districts were chosen. There's some concern about how they were chosen or why the lines were drawn the way they were. If one or both of you guys could address that for us.
Yeah, the bill as drafted, the districts were drawn by the office that draws districts at the state capitol. There was no political input in that whatsoever. It was just employees who work at the Capitol just drew up the districts, and they were unchanged throughout the process. There's no voice planning direction as to what the district should look like. And so, and I have heard questions about how are they drawn this way or that. I think that what you're going to see is that when you divide up into districts a community like this, there's going to be interest from all council members wherever you live. You're likely going to know, I expect, several members who serve on this council. So you'll see them at the grocery store, you'll see them at the library, at the park, whatever. You're going to be able to talk to them about how you feel. And you're actually going to feel you've got more representation because you have multiple council members that you know personally or you go to church with or, you know, or familiar with from work. And I think that that's incredibly exciting. I think that you will be able to have an empowering discussion with members of the council. Like it's just not possible to do, as Clint said, with a current commissioner representing 250,000 people, one commissioner. I mean, this is a completely different situation with a council member representing 7,000 constituents.
And also another measure that Leader Efstration and I discussed heavily when forming the charter, there's two different ways we could have went about it. One was how we proposed it with each council member having a district, and then there's a lot of cities that are formed where the council members are at large. So you could have all 5 council members living in one neighborhood, and you wouldn't have even representation throughout the entire city. And we thought that was important just because of the population density, differences throughout the city, and we wanted to make sure that there was fair representation across the city.
I think this would be a good one for both of you to touch on. I have a lot of questions, a lot of notes from people that are just generally concerned about more government. Anytime you're adding more government, they're concerned of what that could mean, what that could look like. Why do you two feel that this is still a good initiative, even with there being more government being initiated?
Government that's closest to the people governs best. When you got a smaller area that this city will represent, you're going to find a more responsive government in place to reflect your wishes, your interest. And what's baked into this is protections from this becoming another layer of bureaucracy like it might otherwise. No city property taxes, limitations on what services would be provided, and no baked in additional bureaucracy, employees, requirement for there to be an existing infrastructure in place. Rather, you're getting, in my view, the most responsive government that's out there, the ability to be able to call up your neighbor and say, I've got an issue with 1,000 houses being zoned on the corner. It already takes me 5 minutes to get out of my neighborhood because traffic's already backed up in front of my neighborhood. Can you please not support that? You're not having to call a county commissioner who doesn't live in the area and may have a vision to build as many houses and approve as many apartments as possible. Right? That's a complete contrast.
And I would say, as Leader Efstration said, it's a limited city government. You've got the 3 services that are provided, but those 3 services are not adding a layer of bureaucracy to the proposed city of Mulberry. It's more of a layer of protection, in my opinion, dealing with what I do for a living and my background in land use, being able to go next door or go to the neighborhood next door and talk to your city council man or woman about an issue you've got where they're only representing 7,000 folks, having that more local control, dealing with zoning issues. And like I said, real estate and being a real estate guy, it's local. It's always local. Whether you're selling houses or you're selling commercial or whatever it is, each neighborhood has its own character area. And the more local you can be and the closer you can be to those issues, I think is more efficient and not another layer of government.
While we're talking on those same lines, there's been some questions about infrastructure. Obviously, the city's not taking over widening roads or traffic lights or those kind of things, but will there be any effect that the city will be able to talk or negotiate these services with the county once that 2-year period is up? What will be our negotiation power as a city?
Yeah, well, absolutely. First of all, the city is going to be able to speak with a voice here for this part of Gwinnett County. I've heard folks say for years, this area of unincorporated Gwinnett, this Mulberry area, it seems to me like it would make sense for there to be a city there, and there hasn't been one. And I think the point of that is we haven't had the voice that we could have in interactions with Gwinnett to ensure that our local services are what they should be. I was meeting with a constituent last week who talked about just how far the police precinct is from our area, from the across 316. That we need greater attention and greater focus from Gwinnett, that would actually happen if we can speak as one voice.
This question, and I think you touched a little bit on this with the transition period, but this person's interested in knowing what comes next. So when the city initiative passes, what do the next 2 years look like? Can you kind of walk us through that process?
Yeah, so in November, you would have an opportunity to vote on your council members. And they would take office, be sworn in, take office in January. And then what happens, and we've seen this occur when other cities have started. So Brookhaven a few years ago, you had Peachtree Corners, I mentioned, in 2012. What happens is there is then a new effort undertaken to create the structure for how, say, planning and zoning applications would be made and how they would be considered. And so that takes some time to get up and off the ground. But what you would suddenly see, I expect, is that there would be a city center place somewhere, probably in an existing commercial space that's unoccupied. We're not talking about some big grand building or anything like that. It would be unoccupied commercial space would be where you would go for your city permits, for your business license, if your business was in Mulberry. If you had a building permit request, that's where you would go once it was stood up, or if you were requesting a planning or zoning change. And you would go, you'd probably get to meet with the mayor right then. I mean, it would be a very small operation. And you would have the opportunity to voice your concerns if you ever had a problem with something that was going on. For those 2 years, so through the end of 2026, Gwinnett County by law is required to keep existing services in place. There can be no change unless Mulberry and Gwinnett agree to change it. So there's no change in police, no change in fire. That's existing law, by the way. Okay, further, there are areas of Fulton where there hasn't been a service delivery agreement in years and years and years. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen here. In my view, Gwinnett has a very good track record working with our cities and the county together to come up with cost-effective solutions for how to provide services to residents. But what has happened in some places is judges will get involved and say, no, these folks are paying taxes, you have to provide equal services to them, just like you would anywhere else. So it is in my view, it is a misleading argument to claim services are going to change. Your planning and zoning process, stormwater, inspections, those will be at the local city. But your day-to-day life, the things that you do all the time, that's going to be no different. Gwinnett will continue to provide those. The largest, one of the largest parks in the county is here, will continue to be operated by Gwinnett. The other services that we enjoy from Gwinnett will continue to be operated by Gwinnett. And that's all pursuant to the service delivery agreement, which already in law would be unchanged through 2026.
And along those same lines, I've had a couple questions. Let's say down the road that the city and the community decides that they want their own police force. Is that a possibility? What would that look like? What would need to be done to make that happen?
I'll have to pull back up the charter maybe if you want to see it, but you cannot add that under this charter unless it's voted on by all the residents and approved by a majority of the residents. So under how restrictive we made this, it would have to be supported by the residents, a majority vote, and it would have to be passed as part of an updated charter for that to become a reality. And so if in the future there's a desire to create local public safety, and that has been discussed in the past about a concern about response time or a desire to have greater local focus on keeping all of us and our families safe, then that debate could take place with this city council in the future. But ultimately, it's going to have to be supported by you, the voters.
Here's another question back to the mayor. Specifically, what's the term for the mayor? And if the city ultimately would decide, would it be possible to allow the mayor to be elected in the future? You could speak to that.
So the mayor, once elected by the city council, that term would run concurrently with the city council's term, so it'd be a 4-year term.
The term limit question, though, was mentioned earlier, and I just want to reemphasize that there is a 2-term limit for members of the council. So you would not have a council member serving for 30 plus years or a mayor serving for a long, long time, as we've seen elsewhere. That's included in the charter, that there's a 2-term limit.
Yeah, so the citizens would vote, in each district you would vote for your city council man or woman. That was, the lady, she asked if, yeah.
Text.
If you could, yes, just keep texting. It's so much easier. It's cleaner. It works better. I appreciate that. Yes. In fairness, she submitted a question. She was just looking for clarification on her question. So her question specifically, for those of you that didn't hear it, was, is it ever possible to have the citizens vote on the mayor as opposed to the city council members?
And that would take the charter being changed, but currently, I mean, the mayor would be elected by the citizens. It would just be a city council member that then would be elected by the other city council members.
That bothers many of us.
Well, I think that this is a great point. I was just said that bothers many of us, is what was said. I think that what was envisioned here was that we wanted this to be as limited as possible, have one election, keep this thing really small. And if it's the will of the community to change that, there's going to be an opportunity to do that. And if it's popular to do that in the future, I don't see any issue with that being done. I don't have strong feelings about this other than I think that this new city needs to be small and responsive to the residents who live there. And so if there's a structure that's a better way to do it, I think that discussion can take place in the future. But I will tell you this, if it doesn't pass on May 21st, a lot has had to really come together to make this possible. And if it doesn't pass on May 21st, I don't know that this can ever pass in the future for this reason. You have such entrenched interests in making sure that the existing system stays in place. You've got so much money that's opposed to us all having a voice and us all deciding what we should do in the future. And that is a lot to overcome just to get it to this point. And so I think that this is a unique moment in time for us to stand up, work together to get this passed, and then to determine what this city can be in the future. Not to nitpick and say, you know what, I wish if this one little thing was tweaked, I'd feel a little bit better about it. You know, there's always plenty of reasons to come to a no. But when you really get the purpose behind it and you say, I'm going to support this, and I know that this is going to continue to be a project where we're going to I'm going to get to have a voice in who my council member are, who can make this an incredible thing, then I think that there's greater acceptance of the fact that this is going to be a reflection of you. This is not two legislators sitting up here saying this is how it should be, top down. It's going to be your council members being a voice for you, for this entire community.
And I would add to Leader Efstration's earlier comments that, 10 years from now, if this city doesn't pass or is not formed, you'll look back on this moment and then, be looking at, what this area has become. This is just the beginning. This will be your city. This will be your city to decide the future of this area, and then also how the city's run. If there's certain things that you want to change, or as you get the city moving forward and it is, activated, and you think that you need to add a service, or you need to change this, or you need to change how the mayor is elected, then that would be up to y'all, and y'all could do that. This is just a beginning step, but as Leader Efstration said, it's imperative that we get this city voted in on May 21st and moving forward.
Here's if you don't mind, just write it down for us. Here's a question back to the financial feasibility study. Obviously, we are all paying more at the grocery store. Everything's more expensive. There's some concern. Have we really factored in the level of inflation and everything that's going on as far as that feasibility and the accuracy of those numbers? If you guys could speak to that.
So the feasibility experts who worked on this considered multiple years to account for COVID changes that may have had unique data that would have come in. And what I would propose to do is to actually at a future, we've got 2 more of these town hall meetings that are scheduled. They're going to be at the Lakeview Clubhouse. I'm actually going to invite a speaker to come in from Milton or Peachtree Corners who can talk about when the new city was created, some of the questions that were asked at the time, and how they were able to take confidence that the feasibility study that was before them actually provided accurate information, and then how it's been in the ensuing decade and how it's gone from there. I think that would actually be very helpful for all of us to hear from and to be able to ask somebody questions along those lines. The data that's been provided to create this feasibility study is reliable, and it's data that we can trust to give us a true picture of what this is going to be like going forward. And I think that hearing from elected officials in cities, particularly a city that doesn't impose a city property tax, will be very helpful for you to, for all of us to appreciate just how reliable that data is.
Have a couple questions from a couple seniors that are concerned. What about my homestead exemption? What about my school tax exemption? Is any of that going to change if the city passes?
No.
It looks like a couple other questions we have. I really like this one that somebody said. They said, if you had to give, in your opinion, the number one reason why you think this city should pass, I'll ask this to each of you, what would be that number one reason?
To control your own destiny, especially dealing with land use.
I look at my 5-year-old and my 4-year-old when I get home. This is all for them. This is about their future and them being able to live in the same community that I grew up in, not sitting in traffic saying, Dad, I can't live here.
Okay, here's another question about the transition. Specifically, it talks about, you said that Governor Kemp would appoint the people. They want to know, is there any way to get more local control involved in that transitional period?
Yes, so the governor would have the ability to appoint this transition committee, and the governor, as I understand the typical process for this, the governor typically picks folks who are local to the area, right? That would make sense. That and experts on kind of getting cities stood up. So if you have an interest in being involved, there are going to be opportunities for that. We encourage you to get involved, submit your name, be involved in this process right now as we're getting out talking to voters. It's incredibly helpful to hear what's on everyone's mind. And then when this referendum passes on May 21st, put your name forward and say, I would love to be on the transition committee. Or some people have even told me, I would love to run for city council. And as I say to everybody who says that, wonderful. Get out there and talk to voters and represent the community, reflect their wishes and desires. So I think the transition period is going to be a very exciting time because we will then have the control to make this what we want it to be for our future, for our vision of what this community can reach in its full potential.
All right, it's about 8:30. I think here's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and leave it at that for tonight. If anybody has any last minute questions, I don't know if you guys are willing to hang around and maybe talk to people for a few more minutes, but we just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. And don't forget, early voting starts April the 29th. So get out there and vote yes for the city of Mulberry. Let's thank our legislators for being here tonight. Thank you.